My name is Harger. I currently live in Midcoast, Maine. I moved out here to continue working in documentary filmmaking and storytelling in the community. Really love being able to connect with other people with a camera, especially when they get to work behind the camera with me. And I've also really enjoyed working with youth, both in like the classroom teaching filmmaking and also like out at summer camps or even working with youth on films together. We're doing a youth-based documentary at a summer camp that's for transgender and queer kids. There's not a lot of spaces like that. And so it's really fun for them to be able to like tell their own story with us. I hope now living in Maine to be able to do more filmmaking work about the food system here and climate change. It's being impacted a lot here as the weather changes and the coasts and the oceans change. I really want to learn from other people who grow medicinal herbs. Really love to find a way to grow next season, either as a crew member or having my own small farm. I was part of the Training in Applied Agroecology program with Cohort 4. Agroforestry, it's the idea of growing food and medicine and plants in like replicating a forest. There's lots of different ways across the world that people do it. This is kind of a very simple diagram of a coffee farm that utilizes agroforestry methods. Agroforestry is dynamic. It's based in ecology, so what is the life system of the forest? And it's a way to manage forest systems that produce natural resources that humans can benefit from. So food growing on trees or on shrubs that live below the trees. And it also helps farmers diversify their income. So say the trees during one season were producing a crop that could last for 10 or more years. The plants below the tree canopy could be providing a different crop. And then in the long run, the trees could provide like lumber for the farmers as well as a source of income. And this system is all based on everything working together. So the roots, the rocks and the soil, the root systems of the shrubs, helping the root systems of the trees, and thinking about how you farm in that way, that there are kind of vertical layers to it. And so there are 4 major types that the USDA identifies as being agroforestry methods. So alley cropping is really cool. The idea that you just plant more vertical tree growing crops down the, making alleys, and then plant lower crops in like the lower part of the land. This woman you see here, Rose, she's a Kenyan forest farmer. And she planted pigeon peas in kind of closer to the ground and then planted maize on the sides of them. So you have corn and peas that are kind of working more together and actually benefit from like the shade of the other plants. There's silvopasture where you can have sheep and goats that roam underneath the trees that produce crops. And then so you benefit from like having sheep and goat that you can work with, but also it's very good for the land in that the poop from the ruminants provides nitrogen for the soil. They eat the grass to keep plants down. In California, it's actually used a lot for like wildfire protection and mitigation. There's windbreaks is the 3rd category. So that's the idea that like, you know, it's breaking the wind. This is used a lot in the Midwest. It often is a term that's used to describe like keeping very long rows of trees in between kind of flatter, more monocrop farms. Like the picture you see there, that is of soy. And then the last one that's really cool is just protecting the ecosystem around a water body near a farm, so that, you know, the trees around it, one, make sure you have a healthy, successful water source, and as well as like the ecosystem that thrives in the stream and it being able to thrive next to your farm in a way that they benefit each other. So these are kind of the 4 major parts of agroforestry. This is a man whose name is forgetting me right now, but he was featured in the United Plant Savers journal that they put out every year. It's this really awesome medicinal plant conservation organization in Southeast Ohio in Rutland. The picture is of him and a forest that he basically grew over 25, 30 years on his land using agroforestry methods. And a lot of the plants that you see in that picture are plants that he sells for herbal production or for food, things like that. But at face value, it doesn't look like a farm, right? Like it looks like a forest. And then these are just some of the tips that this man from the article in the United Plant Savers gives about growing crops in a forest canopy. So he says that in the first year of planting, you should always make sure to remember that there needs to be shade and sunlight in a forest plant system. So planting trees and planting a ground cover. There always needs to be a high diversity of species, so not planting one of many of the same thing. It's a good thing to have worms and fungus and spiders and birds and amphibians. So sometimes I think of a more traditional farm that uses herbicides or pesticides that might keep birds and insects away. He's arguing it's the opposite here. To plant annuals and perennials in the first year, and then after that, year 2, 3, and onward, to focus on planting perennials so that the system can thrive over time. And he mentions windbreak, inoculants, just some other tips to consider. Don't be afraid to use mulch and wood chips. And that this was the last thing is something I thought was interesting, is that you really want to have really high canopy coverage of the soil surface in year 1. So most of the surface you want to have trees covering and then having crops growing in the modulated light underneath. I think it's fascinating, and it's something I hope to do when I reach a point in life that I have land that I can invest in. Agroforestry projects, really, they're an investment in time, and that they pay off over time in terms of being able to sell some of the foods and medicinal herbs that you can grow. Forest farming is very cool. These are my sources. I have a website that has a lot of my storytelling, photography, and writing and filmmaking on. Feel free to reach out. Instagram is the best way to reach me, and email too.